We will begin this afternoon as usual with the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer. O Sanje Chidan Sogi Cho Nam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Chi Dage Jin Sogi Pesunam Ji Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chidan Tsoge Cho Nam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chapsum Je Dage Jin Sogi Besunam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chidan Tsoge Cho Nam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Je Dage Jin Sogi Besunam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho. In English. Oh, until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of being generous and so forth, may I become a Buddha to help beings. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they dwell in the highest joy, which is devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or aversion for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishtas, the essence of all Buddhas of the three times who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourself that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings, who are as limitless as space, to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do so, we must listen, contemplate, and meditate upon the Dharma. So with this motivation of bodhicitta, please listen to today to these teachings. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. 8 chapters or areas of the Treasury. The third chapter, we're discussing the third chapter, the teachings on the world, which has 2 parts: the world of sentient beings and the container that holds them. And of these 2, we have completed the first. We're talking discussing the container that holds them, and this section has also 3 parts. There is the world, the nature of the supporting container. What is it? The nature of the supporting container, units of measure, and then the lengths of eons. No, I'm getting my areas mixed up. Where did that go? Okay, lifespan, where did it go? Oh, it has, okay. The nature of the supporting container, the sizes of sentient beings, and units of measure. The units of measure has units of distance and units of time, and so we've completed the units of distance. We're discussing the units of time, which has the smaller units of measure, and then also the discussion of eons. Within the discussion of eons, there is an overview and an explanation, and we have completed the overview. The explanation has 3 topics: explaining eons of destruction and formation. The second is explaining eons of abiding, and the third is explaining great eons. And so we're discussing great eons still. And within the discussion of we're discussing great eons, and this has 2 parts. The actual discussion, and additionally the way three great individuals appear. And so these 3 great individuals are Buddhas, self-Buddhas or Pratyeka Buddhas, and wheel-wielding emperors or Chakravarti emperors. So we are still in the middle of the first. We spoke up yesterday about how Buddhas appear after 3 uncountable eons, and we talked about the nature of an uncountable eon as actually being uncountable here being a real number. You can use uncountable to mean actually uncountable, and you can use uncountable to mean a real but very large number. So we discussed that time, and that is what was called here in the topics the cause of the Buddhas, because that is the cause of spending 3 uncountable eons accumulating merit. It's not just spending 3 uncountable eons. We've all done 3 uncountable eons in samsara, multiple times over, unfortunately, if we have an infinite samsara. And we haven't accumulated the cause of Buddhahood. The Buddha did, and awoke to Buddhahood mainly because the Buddha made the decision that he wanted to. That's the only difference, really. So after the Buddha has accumulated the cause, the Buddha appears in the world. And so what sort of phase does a Buddha appear in? And so that is the next topic at the top of page 285. Topic B, the time they appear. During the decrease to 100 years. So this is one of these sections where the root verse kind of actually goes as a sentence that is broken up over 2 different topics. And so the first part of the sentence is, then after 3 uncountable of these appears a Buddha. And then when does a Buddha appear? During the decrease to 100 years. The Buddhas appear during the decrease of beings' lifespan to 100 years. They do not appear during the period of increase or when lifespan is less than 100 years, because it is difficult for beings to develop weariness during the former, and because the latter is a bad and lowly time of the 5 degenerations of life, time, afflictions, views, and sentient beings. So remember, we have the eons or the intermediate eons. So during a great eon, you've got 20 eons of formation. So that's not the time when the Buddha appears. And you've got 20 eons of staying. that is the time when a Buddha can appear. So during those 20 eons of staying, there are periods when the being's lifespan decreases from 80,000 years down, or uncountable at first, but mostly from 80,000 down until 10 years. And then there are intermediate eons where it increases from 10 years to 80,000 years, right? So you've got that decrease and the increase and the decrease and the increase. So it's during the time when beings' lifespan, when human beings on the Rose Apple land have decreasing lifespans. And so the reason why it is during a decreasing lifespan is it is like during the increasing lifespan, everything's looking good. Things are getting better. And no one wants to think about changing things when things are getting better. What happens when you have an election when the economy is going great? Everyone votes for the incumbents because everything's great. You don't need to change anything. Everything's fine. Just keep it going and we'll be okay, you think. You still are stuck in samsara. But during the time when the lifetime is decreasing, you can see that life is just getting a little bit worse. Every generation is just getting a little bit worse. And so during that time is when beings can develop renunciation and the feeling like they need to free themselves from samsara. So that is a time when a Buddha can appear. And I mean, a Buddha could appear during the time of increase, but people wouldn't be interested. It's like, yeah, let's go out and enjoy. Life is good. And so it's when times are getting worse that a Buddha can appear, because that is the time when beings can be more receptive to the Dharma. But not during that entire time, because during that whole time you have degeneration. And after you get to the point when the being's lifespan is less than 100 years, then a Buddha won't appear. That's because you have the degenerations, the 5 degenerations of life, time, afflictions, view, and sentient beings. So you've got these 5 afflictions, 5 degenerations, right? You hear about this all the time. There's a wonderful line in Trungpa Rinpoche's Sadhana of Mahamudra when the 5 degenerations are running rampant. It's just like perfect, you know. But here when we talk about 5 degenerations, we mean life. So life means that that humans' lifespan is getting shorter. That's life. Then you've got time. The time means that the time is getting worse and it's less and less easy to find good things. As it specifically says, that the food gets less good, the medicines and medicinal herbs get less effective, so forth. Things just getting worse and worse. So it's like when you used to be able to get produce that had food, that had flavor and nutrition, and all you can get is like cardboard produce that has neither flavor nor nutrition, right? And then you have the degeneration of afflictions. The degeneration of afflictions means that in people, in general, people's desire is getting stronger and stronger. And because people are getting more and more desirous, they have less interest in going forth and practicing spiritual path. And then there's the degeneration of views. So people's views get worse and worse. Their understandings and ideas get harder and worse, and so they are less likely to go forth and become monastics. And even if they do, their views are too strong to let them really get anywhere. And then the degeneration of sentient beings means that sentient beings get less and less healthy. They have less strong, they're weaker, less vivacious, they just aren't as good until their life decreases to a length of 10 years, which is pretty quick for a human. But such is being's karma. So those are the 5 degenerations, and the reason for thinking about them is because we hear that term a lot. So this is where it's explained. It's not explained here other than just mentioned. It's explained in the auto commentary and other longer commentaries. Then there are so that's the description of the Buddhas. Then the second type of being are the self-Buddhas or the Pratyeka Buddhas. Now the self-Buddhas, I have to admit, is a translation that I came up because I thought, people don't understand the word Pratyeka Buddhas. Some people translate it as solitary realizers, but solitary realizers isn't quite right, beyond being a kind of ungainly phrase. It just doesn't actually capture the meaning of the word. So I translated it as self-Buddhas, but frankly, the word that everyone uses is the Sanskrit word. So we might just have to go back to using the Sanskrit word and call them Pratyeka Buddhas. So Pratyeka Buddha in Sanskrit, Pacceka Buddha in Pali, Pratyeka Buddha. But that's what we mean here. In both self-Buddhas. So both here means both times of degeneration, times of decrease of lifespan, and in the time of decrease. Self-Buddhas can appear in both. In both times, when the lifespan is increasing and when it is decreasing, self-Buddhas or Pratyeka Buddhas can appear. The 80,000 attendants of given by fire became self-Buddhas during a period of increase. An excellent white tip appeared on the earth during a period of decrease. So these are examples, the historical examples of self-Buddhas, at which time there are the 500 self-Buddhas who appeared in the deer park of the fallen sages. So you have to remember there are two different types of self-Buddhas. There are the rhinoceros-like, or sometimes I shortened it to rhino-like, the rhinoceros-like self-Buddhas, and there are the congregating self-Buddhas. So there are two, rhinoceros-like, congregating. The difference is that the rhinoceros-like are like rhinoceros in that they are solitary. They appear and they go off and meditate upon the 12 links of interdependence on their own without a teacher in their last lifetime and achieve enlightenment on their own. The congregating self-Buddhas gather in charnel grounds in groups of 500 and meditate on the 12 links together, and they achieve the result of self-Buddhahood. So that's one difference. And their cause, now their cause here meaning the merit that they need, their cause, following 100 eons, a rhino appears. So we mentioned this briefly when we were talking about the self-Buddhas a few days ago. Also, we talked about how they're greater in terms of their wisdom, but not in terms of merit. So their merit, they only have 100 eons, and here, following 100 eons of the three trainings, that is 100 great eons, not 100 intermediate eons, 100 great eons of the three trainings, the training in discipline, the training in samadhi, and the training in prajna, the accumulations of enlightenment as the cause of awakening. So a rhinoceros-like self-Buddha attains self-enlightenment and appears. So for the rhinoceros-like, they have to have that 100 eons of training primarily in prajna, more than in the merit. So training in the three trainings. Because you've got the discipline leads to samadhi, and samadhi leads to prajna as a kind of rough overview of the three trainings. So because of that, they're developing their prajna, which allows them to gather wisdom and therefore awaken to self-Buddhahood. Now the congregating self-Buddhas are a little bit different, and in fact, up until you're on the point, on the path of joining, we've got the 5 paths: accumulation, joining, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Even on the path of joining, someone can shift focus from wanting to achieve arhatship to wanting to achieve self-Buddhahood. So you can achieve that shift at that point. So it's said that ordinary individuals can therefore shift their focus or their aim, their intention at some point during the training and become self-Buddhists. But they wouldn't become the rhino-like type. They would become the congregating types. Then the third type of individual are the wheel-wielding emperors. They're the ones who how do they enter the womb? When you talk about the Buddhas enter the womb, stay in the womb, and emerge from the womb knowingly, right, wittingly. The self-Buddhas enter and stay wittingly. And then we have the third type, the wheel-wielding emperors. Wheel-wielding is kind of a little translation of the Sanskrit Chakravarti, or the Tibetan Korlojurwa Yalbo. This is 3 topics: the time they appear, the classifications of their types, and distinctions in qualities. Wheel-wielding emperors appear when life is not less than 80,000. So wheel-wielding emperors who wield political power through their all-powerful weapons, wheels. So this is kind of a different type of wheel than you're going to find on an automobile. This is like a kind of a weapon. These are also, I think, mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita and other texts. So this is kind of something from a weapon that's a wheel that spins up in the sky, goes very quickly, and comes down and destroys all its foes. So this is the method. And so the wheel-wielding emperors wield these wheels, the all-powerful weapon that no one else can use, and therefore they're able to be victorious all the time. And they appear during a time when human life ranges from uncountable to not less than 80,000 years. So it's only when you have so in the beginning, in the long beginning, you have the long time. So there's a point after the kings and chieftains and kings and so forth first appear, because there aren't any kings at first, which we'll get to a little bit later today. But once there start to be kings, then you could have a wheel-wielding emperor. Or when but then when it decreases below 80,000 years, no wheel-wielding emperors until it goes back up to 80,000 years. Then you could have a wheel-wielding emperor again, right? So it's not all the time. Right now, we couldn't have a wheel-wielding emperor, which is kind of interesting, because the Shakyamuni, this is a doubt that I don't see addressed in the Abhidharma, which is kind of unusual. I would expect that this doubt would be addressed, because it was prophesied when the Buddha was, when Siddhartha Gautama was born in Lumbini, that he would either become a Buddha or a wheel-wielding emperor. So, either beings 2,600 years ago had the lifespan of 80,000 years, or there is some discrepancy here. And so I think it's more likely the latter. There's a discrepancy. The discrepancy is likely that there are different presentations given in different times. And it could be one, and since I haven't seen the scriptural things about it, I don't really know, but you could possibly imagine an argument like where saying that the Siddhartha Gautama would become a wheel-wielding emperor would be more along the lines of saying, what do we say? That he wouldn't be an actual wheel-wielding emperor, but just a really powerful emperor of that time. I don't know. That's kind of just off the top of my head. So this is actually a very dangerous type of speculation to engage in. However, it's important to think about these kind of things and look at them. So give it some thought. When the lifespan is shorter than that, there is not sufficient wealth for one to appear. So when you have a short lifespan, there's not enough prosperity to have such a great empire as that. Then the classifications of their types, so there meaning the wheel-wielding emperors, and this has 4 points. The actual classification with wheels of gold, silver, copper, iron. So they have wheels, the weapons that is, of gold, silver, copper, and iron. So these are the supreme, the nearly supreme, the middle, and the least. These are the 4. So silver is nearly supreme. Gold is supreme, right? So gold is supreme, silver is nearly supreme, copper is middling, and iron is the least. And then which countenance they have power over. So with their wheels, the wheel-wielding emperors, the universal emperors, would have power over 1 or more continents, whether it be 1, 2, 3, or 4, the continents of humans. And here it says, they rule over 1, 2, 3, or else 4 continents in reverse order. They rule over one continent, 2 continents, 3 continents, or else 4 continents in reverse order. So this would mean, reverse order means that if they rule over one continent, then they have the iron wheel. If they rule over 2 continents, they have the copper wheel. This is reverse order, basically, just going. So if they have 3 continents, what would they be? Silver. And if they have 4 continents, there's only one left, multiple choices, easy, gold, right? So that's reverse order. Gold, silver, copper, and iron, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then the next line, the elaboration on this is, at once there are never 2 like Buddhas. So they never have 2 appearing at the same time. There is only one wheel-wielding emperor at a time. At one time there are never 2. It is like Buddhas, for example, of whom there are never 2 that appear in the world at the same time. So here, again, there is another question. There are an infinite number of universes. So if one Buddha appears in this universe, for example, when Shakyamuni appeared in this universe, does that mean that all the infinite other universes did not have Buddhas at that time? And so there's a bit of debate in the auto commentary, but basically some people say that there's only one in each universe. Some people say that there may be what do we say? That when you say never 2 at the same time, that you are saying within one universe. And this comes from a quote by a quote from a sutra where the Buddha is speaking with Shariputra and says, is it possible that there could be ever be anyone else who would have qualities such as mine at the same time? And Shariputra says, no, that is not possible, essentially. So that's why they say, okay, there can only be one at a time. The Mahayana, we'd say that there'd be multiple at any given time. But perhaps only one supreme Nirmanakaya in the Mahayana. But since we're not talking about the Mahayana, I better not go off on that. So how they achieve victory, we're talking about the universal or the wheel-wielding emperors. When their opponents welcome them, or they themselves advance or gird for battle or just brandish weapons, they triumph without causing harm. So when you're an emperor, there's only one way you become an emperor, and that's by conquering, frankly. You have to conquer. Otherwise, you're not going to be what did the Roman Empire, or the Persian Empire, or the Chinese Empire, or the Aztec Emperor do with all the areas around them? They conquered them. So the universal emperors also have to, the wheel-wielding emperors also have to conquer the areas around them. But how do they do it? Well, the wheel-wielding emperors have such great merit that no one actually, and they have those wheels, so no one actually wants to go into battle against them. The way the 4 wheel-wielding emperors are victorious is over all is respectively when their opponents welcome them, or they themselves advance, or merely gird for battle, or after preparing just brandish their weapons. In other words, when you've got the first type, the wheel-wielding emperors who have the gold wheels, their neighbors know they've got that gold wheel. We don't stand a chance. And so they send a party and the white flag they send it to the wheel-wielding emperor. They say, okay, we will be your vassals, or whatever you say. And then the next one is when the wheel-wielding emperors, instead of the opponents just coming to them and welcoming them, please come and take over our land, the wheel-wielding emperors and their armies advance on the neighboring country. And the neighboring country look and they say, and so they look and they say, oh, wait a minute, there is this wheel-wielding emperor, and they have a silver wheel. So the first one, the welcoming, is the gold wheel. The second is the silver wheel. So they see the silver wheel and they think, we don't have a chance. Okay. And then sometimes if they have the copper wheel, just advancing isn't enough. So they actually have to have all of the soldiers put on their armor and brandish their weapons. At that point, the enemy says, okay, we don't stand a chance. They've got a copper wheel. Here, it's yours. And then, they gird for battle, not brandishing their weapons yet. Sorry. They just gird. They put on their armor and they show that they're ready to fight. That's the copper. And then the last one is where they actually take out the weapons. Everyone draws their swords and they get their spears ready or whatever they're doing. And the opponent says, it's that iron wheel, no chance. Okay? So that's the way they do it. But they never cause any harm. They triumph without taking life or causing any other harm. Because they come through a lot of merit, they practice virtue. This is why they have all of the signs of a great being. They naturally are peaceful and loving. And so they go and they make the display because they know that if they increase their dominion, they can help more beings or be, I guess maybe it's just part of being a universal emperor that you have to have a large empire. Okay. Next one is the distinction in qualities. So we have the wheel-wielding emperors and the self-Buddhas and the Buddhas. And one of the things about the wheel-wielding emperors and the Buddhas is that both are born with the marks of a great being, the 32 major marks, the 80 minor marks. So what is the difference between the wheel-wielding emperor's marks and the Buddha's marks? The sage's marks remain in place, clear and complete, so they're superior. Clear and complete, so they're superior. So the sage, that means the Buddhas, the 32 marks remain in place. They're very clear, very easy to see, and they have all of them. So wheel-wielding emperors also have the major marks. So what is the difference between their marks and the sages, you ask? The sages' marks remain in their place without moving. So in other words, when you have the drawing of the wheels and the palms and the soles of the feet, then those drawings remain in the same place in the soles of the feet and the hands, right? They stay in the same places. Which is implying that the wheel-wielding emperors might shift somewhat over time. They are more radiant and their parts are clear and complete. So with the Buddha, the wheels and the soles of their feet, for example, have 1,000 spokes, clearly visible. You can see all 1,000 spokes. And so on, so they are superior. So that is the three types of beings. And so now we're in the section of discussing, we've been talking, where does this come from? So now we're back in the length of an eon. The length of an eon had three different topics, which is identifying eons, the way the long being diminishes, and destructive eons. So we've just finished that first, which is identifying eons, and that bit about the three types of individuals was like an elaboration on that. So now we have the section on the way the long beginning diminishes. So remember, the long beginning is the period in the first of the eons, the first of the intermediate eons, when human life on the Rose Apple land decreases from uncountable or incalculable to 80,000 years. So this is three topics: the particulars of the first eon, how it diminishes, and what happens at the end of the diminishing. There's some things that are kind of mentioned in the Wangchuk Dorje text, but that also come up in many prayers and things that we recite. So this first period, the particulars of the first eon, and the particulars of the first eon, the earliest beings are like form gods. This is what we call an age of perfection. So in the Tibetan tradition, when we have prayers, we say, May all beings enjoy the bounty of an age of perfection or something like that, or be as happy as in an age of perfection. This is the type of age that we're specifically talking about. So this is a time when human beings are like the form realm gods. They have bodies that are made of light and so forth. So just after the formation of the world, the earliest human beings are born miraculously. They do not eat food. They have radiant bodies. They can perform miracles. And they live for incalculable numbers of eons, like the form realm's gods. So they have a very incalculable numbers of years, like the form realm's gods. So these are the qualities of these beings, and so they start out being basically really great beings. So how is it that they can decrease? How is it that everything decreases over time? So the how it diminishes. This is 3 points. So after you have the age of perfection, then you have an age of threefold qualities, then an age of twofold qualities, and then an age of strife. So here, first is the age of threefold qualities. Now, threefold means that there are like 6 different qualities in the age of perfection, so there are 3 of them. That's why an age of threefold qualities. They gradually feel greed for tastes. So at first, they don't need to eat. But then, one of them starts to feel greed for taste. Then they gradually ate the 3 foods of honey-like nectar of earth, yellow dust, and the grove of reeds. So this is how it's explained in Wangchuk Dorje. It's a little bit different in the Chim Abhidharma, the ornament of Abhidharma. And it's quite kind of interesting to read there. Anyways, one of them, who's a little bit more greedy than the rest, picks up a handle of earth and starts eating it, and it's really delicious. He says, "Hey guys, this is good." And so everyone starts picking it up and eating it. And as people eat more and more, so as they eat more and more, then the earth disappears. They deplete it, basically, eat it all up. And then they eat the leaves of a particular type of tree. That here it says yellow dust. In the Chim Abhidharma it says the leaves of a particular type of tree that have a really wonderful flavor. And they eat those all up, they're all gone. And then they eat the leaves of another type of tree. And that tree has a flavor like a grove of reeds, which is similar to what Wangchuk Dorje says. But at any rate, they're eating these naturally appearing foods, and as the naturally foods are depleted, then what happens is their bodies get heavy, their radiance weakens, and their complexion gets dark. And then there are divisions between them too, because some of them eat more and they get darker complexions, and some of them eat less and they stay light. And the ones who eat less start looking down upon the ones who ate more and have darker complexions, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about these days. So how is it that people with light skin tend to be, what do we say? Tend to be racist towards people with dark skin. So this is one origin myth or origin story of how that kind of started. But an obvious was already well known during the time of the Buddha. They already had the caste system. In the caste system, you tended to have the higher castes be people of lighter complexion. The darker castes, the darker complexions were more in the lower castes. By the force of karma, the sun, moon, and so forth then provided light. So before then, their bodies provided light. Then afterwards, their bodies lost the light because they started eating, so then the light appeared. So then you needed the sun and moon for light. So out of karma, that's when the sun and moon appeared. Those who ate a lot of those foods developed a bad color, and those who ate a little had a good color. Because of this, those with good color scorned those with bad and acted non-virtuously. So those foods disappeared. But at that time, there were still grains, still plentiful grains. So they began to feel greed for the taste of the salu rice crops that grew without toil, so filth and so forth appears. So then they were still hungry and wanted to eat, and there are all these abundant natural grains. You could just go out and eat as much as you wanted, and they ate as much as they wanted. And as always happens when you use as much as you want of something, you use it all up. So what happens? And by doing that, they also, because they're eating heavier food, they also started, their filth and so forth appears. This is kind of a polite way of saying that they had to go to the bathroom. They had to defecate and urinate, starting from this point. They also developed the male and female faculties and the colors and shapes. The differentiation of the genders began at that point. And then they saw each other, and desire arose, and they acted indecently. Others saw and criticized them, so they built houses and such for propriety. So that's how we got houses. So that's the age of threefold qualities. And so then the decline continues. How the age of twofold qualities and the age of strife arose. The verse continues, grow lazy and then gather and hoard. So this is an incomplete sentence in the verse, because actually the sentence started in the previous line. They gradually feel greed for tastes. That's the threefold quality. Then here we have the twofold qualities in the age of strife, grow lazy and then gather and hoard. Landholders then appoint field chieftains. When they wanted to take the sallow rice, they grew lazy, and then some started to gather and hoard. So they began threshing the rice and also reaping it. When that happened, it no longer grew. It did not grow. So then those beings became unfriendly, because the resources started getting scarce. So what happens when resources get scarce? People get into conflict over resources. We see this all the time. Each took full possession of his own, and they divided the fields. So they, before, whereas just, communal property, they now broke it up into land. The landholders stole from each other, and a man who was good by nature was then appointed and installed as a field chieftain. So they decided that instead of going they went from being a communal society into having a chieftain. He was granted a sixth of the crop and called the king respected by many. So this is the origin of taxation. So actually it was the common practice at the time of the Buddha for the farmers to give a sixth of their crop to the kings. This is just the way, and this continued throughout ancient India for quite a while. There's still mentions of it in the middle of the first millennium. I'm not sure how long that practice continued, but I think it basically was the root of Indian of the Indian system, the taxation. So then how the lifespan becomes 10 years. So how it decreases to 10 years. Because of their strong karmic paths, their lifespan shortens to 10 years. So karmic paths, we'll talk more about karma and karmic paths in the next chapter. Karmic path, the meaning of the term means like it's a path that leads you to action. Karma means action. So it's the path that gets you to action. In particular, these are the paths, the ways of thinking that bring you to unvirtuous action, because this is talking about the age of degeneration. Because of acting out of their strong, non-virtuous karmic paths, their lifespan shortens to 10 years for humans, and they are not able to live any longer than that. So that's during the ages of decrease. That's the end, the age of diminishing. So what happens at an age? So this is the whole time. The age of diminishing keeps going, and then you come to the age of diminishing, and what happens then? There are 2 points to this. There's first, teaching how the 3 ages of calamities happen. It's weapons, pestilence, and famine that bring an eon to its end. And here by eon we mean an intermediate eon of decreasing, not a great eon here. This is the intermediate eon. When the human lifespan is 10 years, it is ages of weapons, pestilence, and famine that bring an intermediate eon to its end. So here is also when you are reciting your reciting dedication prayers, or when you hear lamas giving prayers, there's a formulaic way of saying, may all beings be free of, sometimes we translate it as the misfortune of plague, famine, and war. Or we could translate it as ages of plague, famine, and war. It really should be ages of plague, famine, and war. And this is what it's referring to. At the end of the decrease of the eon, when lifespan is only 10 years, there is a period of plague or pestilence, a period of famine, and a period of war, and that brings the that intermediate eon to its end. So the duration of these three, for 7 days, then 7 months, then 7 years, respectively. So they last. The weapons last for 7 days, the pestilence for 7 months and 7 days, and famine for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Those sentient beings are killed by weapons for 7 days. Then the sentient beings are killed by, so first 7 days of weapons, 7 months of pestilence, right? So then they're killed by pestilence for 7 months and 7 days, and then by famine for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days in succession. The plural of the word days in the root indicates that the 7 days also follow the latter two. In the Sanskrit, there is the word cha, which means sort of and or including or so forth, and it was hard to fit it in because the way lists are made in Sanskrit and the way they are made in Tibetan are different than we do it in English, so I just decided, in the Sanskrit it's clear, it says it's that word cha that has the, that indicates that it includes the days. In English, we didn't have that word, so I just said it was the plural. I don't know if that was the right decision. I'm having second thoughts, otherwise I wouldn't say this over YouTube. Not only YouTube and Facebook and Gompa services, so even wider distribution. So, when these happen in the Rose Apple land, something somewhat similar also happens on the other two continents. So that's how the decrease comes to an end. And then at that point, the auto commentary speaks about how the beings then actually begin to act virtuously. They start cooperating and acting virtuously. And because of that, then lifespan increases back up. So those are the intermediate eons. And so now we are back to discussing destructive eons, the eons of destruction. So these are talking about the eons of destruction. Remember, we have the 20 intermediate eons of formation, 20 intermediate eons of staying, and then 20 intermediate eons of destruction. So here, that is what we are speaking at now. So this has 3 topics. How the levels up to the 3rd dhyana are destroyed, so the desire realm, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd dhyana. How the 4th dhyana is destroyed, and the number of destructions by fire, water, and wind. So how levels up to the 3rd dhyana are destroyed? This has 3 points. Then fire and water and then wind bring 3 additional destructions. Then, when all sentient beings have been gathered in one dhyana, there is a destruction for fire by 7 days. So if you remember from yesterday, we spoke about how gradually all of the lower realms are depopulated and people are reborn either in other universes or they're reborn on higher levels until everyone is on the 1st jhana or the 2nd. So at that point, there is destruction by fire for 7 days. And then at the end of another great eon, when everyone gets up into the 2nd or 3rd dhyana, then there's destruction by rain and floods, by water. So terrible rain and floods. And then at the end of other great eons, when everything's depopulated up to the 4th dhyana, then there's destruction of the entire container of the world by extremely violent wind. So these bring 3 additional destructions so that not even an atom remains. So even the atoms are just completely gone. There's nothing left at all. There's a long bit here about whether atoms are permanent or impermanent, and discussion between the Buddhists and the Vaisheshik schools, and of course we say that they're impermanent, they're all destroyed, they're all gone. Now the crests that remain undestroyed, these crest respectively at the 3 dhyanas, second and so forth. This means the 3 types of destruction by fire, water, and wind crest respectively at the 2nd dhyana, 3rd dhyana, and 4th dhyana. 3rd dhyana. 4th dhyana, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th dhyanas. These 3 additional destructions crest respectively at the 3 dhyanas because those 3 dhyanas remain after destruction. So it's like if you have the flood that is cresting at 2 meters above flood level, everything at 3 meters above flood level is still safe. Those 3 additional destructions crest respectively at those 3 dhyanas because those 3 dhyanas remain after destruction. So the destruction by fire crests at the 2nd dhyana, which means everything up to and including the 1st dhyana is destroyed, gone. The crest of destruction by fire is the 2nd dhyana, and then the phrase and so forth in the root indicates that the crest of destruction by water is the 3rd dhyana, so that means that everything up to and including the 2nd dhyana is destroyed by water. And then the crest of destruction by wind is the 4th dhyana. So this means that the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd would then be destroyed by wind. This is because the first dhyana and below are destroyed by fire, the 2nd dhyana and below by water, and the 3rd dhyana and below are destroyed by wind. The reason why these jhanas are destroyed by fire, water, and wind is because of the particular types of qualities of those jhanas. The impurities are less pure, shall we say. In the 1st jhana, you have strong powers of analysis, considering and examining. The 2 mental factors are extremely strong and very incisive analysis. So that's kind of like fire. So because of that quality, that is sort of fire-like quality, then the 1st jhana is destroyed by that. The 2nd jhana, you have joy. You have the mental factor of joy, the quality of joy. And that joy is it makes the body and mind be very pliable, and it's sort of like makes it all be soft and pliable, which means it's kind of like water. So that dhyana is destroyed by water. That level of the form realm is destroyed by water. And then the 3rd dhyana is destroyed by air. Excuse me. This was in my mind half an hour before I started. And now it's completely slipped my mind, but fortunately I brought another resource. Oh, what do we say? What do they say? Okay. In the 3rd jhana, there's still breathing. That's right. There's breathing. And because there's breathing, it can still be destroyed by wind. I didn't have to look at it. So the next topic, the reasons for those, because those correspond to their faults. This is because those, fire, water, and wind, correspond to the 3 jhanas' internal faults. Considering and examining are like fire, joy and pleasure are like water, and the inhalation and exhalation are like wind. They are destroyed by fire, water, and wind, respectively. Okay? I didn't have to think. I could have just read. How the 4th jhana is destroyed. This has 2 points. But not the 4th. teaching that the fourth jhana first, the 2 points, the first of the points is teaching that it is not destroyed by fire, water, or air, but not the fourth, since it's immovable. But there is not an external cause for the destruction on the fourth jhana, since it is immovable by the 8 faults, as will be explained in the 8th area. So that'll be next year's teaching when we'll get to the 8 faults, assuming that we are all around next year. Then the second point here is the actual way that it is destroyed. So the fourth jhana, you might wonder, well, if it's not destroyed by these, is it therefore permanent? The answer is no. It doesn't all come and go all at the same time, but it is not permanent. It's not permanent. Its palaces and beings arise and then they perish. So the container of the fourth jhana, that is the external environment, is not permanent because its palaces and beings arise and then they perish. So when a being is born, their palace also arises, and then the being dies and the palace disappears. And so the dhyana itself is always changing as beings are born and as they pass away. Everything is impermanent. So there's no permanent heaven, even for those of you who would love to have one. So those are the destructions, and so the ages of destruction. So we have basically we have the 3 types of destruction. We have the destruction by fire, destruction by water, and destruction by wind. So how often do they happen? When do they happen? They happen at the ends of the great eons, right? You've got the 20 of formation, you've got the 20 of staying, and the 20 of destruction. So at the end of the 20 of destruction, there's got to be one of these destructions by fire, water, or wind. There's 7 by fire, then 1 by water. When 7 by water are thus finished, then 7 by fire, and after that, finally, wind will bring destruction. There are 7 times when there are destructions by fire. 7 times means there are 7 great, if we're starting with great eon number 1. So great eons number 1 through 7 are destroyed by fire. At the end, it agrees fire. It means everything up through and including the first jhana are destroyed. Then after those, there is 1 destruction by water, which means that great eon number 8 is destroyed. At the end of great eon number 8, there is destruction by water. That's 1 set of 8, right? Then after a succession of 7 destructions by fire, there is another destruction by water. So the process repeats itself. 7 of water, 7 of fire, 1 of water. 7 of fire, 1 of water. And you do this until you have had 7 destructions by water. And when 7 destructions by water are thus finished, in other words, you've had 7 times 8 great eons already. That's 7 times 8, so that's a total of what? 56 great eons, right? There is a sequence of 7 destructions by fire. So there is another 7 by fire, that's 57 through 63, I believe. And then at the end of every 64th great eon, there is finally destruction by wind. So that means that destruction by wind gets everything up through up to, but not including the level of cloudness, up through immeasurable virtue. So that is here. This completes the area. This completes the 3rd area called Teachings on the World from the verses of the Treasury of Abhidharma. Then that's the colophon explaining that from the root text, and then there's the colophon from for the chapter. This completes the explanation of the 3rd area called Teachings on the World from the explanation of the verses of the Treasury of Abhidharma, called the Essence of the Ocean of Abhidharma, the words of those who know and love, explaining youthful play, opening the eyes of Dharma, the chariot of easy practice. So that actually gives the full title of Wangchuk Dorje's text that we call Youthful Play. When we call it Youthful Play, there's some debate on what we should use, because there are lots of different things that you could use as a short title in this. So when I was studying this, we were calling it Shunhu Namro, I mean the Youthful Play. But some people say that actually we should call it the Chariot of Easy Practice because it is like an introduction to Mikya Dorje's commentary, which is called the Springtime Cow of Easy Accomplishment. Whatever people say, it's just a name. Now, a few words here. Because of the second Vasubandhu, Vijayakirti's full explanation of these signs and meanings. So the second Vasubandhu, Vijayakirti, was one of Wangchuk Dorje's two teachers, and he's the one who gave him many of these teachings. And the development of my intelligence, I've explained the treasury of the world. So he's taught this chapter on the world from the treasury. May the great masses of virtue greatly please the mighty guides appearing in all three times. May their 100 peals of laughter pacify the tumult of false teachers. So here we are going through the Abhidharma, and we've completed these teachings on the world. So it's the first chapter that we will discuss this year, and we'll start tomorrow with the teachings on karma. And we were talking about this in terms of the teachings. So there's a question from YouTube, basically. So let's just ask him, basically, how does this Abhidharma teaching fit in to the grand scheme of things? Basically, when we have the teachings on Abhidharma, the teachings on Abhidharma developed as compilations of salient points from the sutras, because the Buddha taught various different things in different places. He didn't teach things all in the same way. So what happened is that when people wanted to learn about the teachings on the world, for example, they had to go and take the and remember, well, in this sutra it says this, and that sutra it says this, and then they put it all together, and that's how you got the teachings in the world. So then these teachings were preserved. Now, as Buddhism spread to many different places, there were the 18 different schools that developed. And each of these had a slightly different style of Abhidharma. So one of those styles of Abhidharma would be the Theravada Abhidharma that spread down to Sri Lanka, starting from the 2nd or 3rd century BC, the time of the emperor, from the time of the Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. From that time forward, and the Theravada teachings flourished in going to the south. There are also traditions that came to the west, and that would include the teachings of the Great Exposition, or Vaibhashika school, which developed over time. And these teachings of the Vaibhashika school are the basis for these teachings by Vasubandhu. Now, you would also find Abhidharma from the other traditions as well, I assume, but they have not been preserved in the Tibetan tradition. There may be some in some of the other traditions preserved in the Chinese tradition, but they didn't gain the same popularity as this teaching by Vasubandhu. So this teaching of Vasubandhu is like the Theravada teachings. It's also a foundation vehicle. It's what we in Sanskrit called Hinayana, and in English we usually say foundation vehicle teaching. So they're about the same level in that they're teachings organizing the sutras that are primarily based on helping people achieve liberation for themselves. Then this teaching also spread into Tibet, because it's a really excellent overview of the sutras and the teachings in the sutras. So that spread into Tibet. So it became the basis of Abhidharma study in Tibet. But also, around the same time as Vasubandhu, his elder half-brother Asanga also started compiling the Mahayana Abhidharma. And so this is compiled in teachings such as the Bodhisattva levels and so forth, which are voluminous teachings, and they're also preserved in the Tibetan tradition. And one of the nicest expositions of these is the Gateway to Knowledge by Mipam Rinpoche. So that's Mahayana Abhidharma. In the Vajrayana, we don't talk about Abhidharma. It's just not a topic of this. Abhidharma is pretty much a sutra level teaching. But what we're talking about here are the foundation level teachings. And so the main difference between these and the Theravada teachings is that the teachers who took the Theravada teachings to Sri Lanka and then later to Thailand and Burma had a slightly different focus in their teachings, and so they organized the teachings differently. The foundation is pretty similar. There are some differences, some interesting differences that you have to look, but they're basically the same. So you can't really say that one is better than the other. They've just got different focuses. So that is that. So I think that is enough for this afternoon. So now let us please dedicate the virtue from teaching and listening to the Dharma, so that all sentient beings may be free of illness, be free of famine, be free of war, and so that they may all swiftly achieve the glories of an age of perfection and then come to the state of Buddhahood. O sanam de tam che se pani tobne nye pedranam pam chene Kengana chim barlap trumbai sibet sole drowa sho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy wrongdoing, and free all wanderers from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Thank you.